morning. I think it's morning.
It is morning, at least here.
Yeah, well, apparently, according to our chat, we're late, and people should know by now I'll be late to my own damn funeral. So, just saying. All right, so let's take a quick spin through the chat. We have question of track in there. Good morning, Conti, or afternoon. It'd be afternoon for you. And welcome, my love, Mrs. Canuck. John DeMarco, welcome. And Archer Collin, welcome. Brightest Day, welcome. Thomas Potts. Hopefully everybody is having a good Monday morning.
Or afternoon.
Or evening, or if you're watching...
I'm working on them, folks.
In the morning.
I'm working on them. It's tough. I'm usually on time, but Robert, it's just...
No, I'll be late to my own funeral, and I'm...
And then we got Zoe today. Zoe's always late, so...
No, never blame the guest. You always take the blame on yourself. That way,
Well, I'll pay for it.
Even if it is the guest's fault, but it isn't, Conti's not here, so definitely we're not late because of the guest. So with that, we shall bring our guest in. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Zoe.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, not a problem.
We appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. We had Conti here, and, we were like 6 hours late because of that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Never blame the guest, remember? Never blame the guest.
No, unless it's Conti. I learned that from your show. Oh, bloody hell. So with that, I'll let you introduce the topic, and we'll go from there. We're going far back in history for this one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Get the TARDIS ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in the 12th century, where we're having a visit to... It's not the 12th century, it's the 11th century. Yes. No, it is 12th century, because... Oh my goodness, I am starting
It's all
off
wibbly wobbly.
It is the 12th century. It's quite early in the 12th century, and we're talking about the First English Civil War, which the Victorians decided in their infinite wisdom to call the Anarchy, because they have a weird way of measuring history. The Victorians measured English history as a progression of the Constitution of England.
Mm-hmm.
So during the time when apparently that broke down, even though it actually didn't, they decided that was an anarchic period, and the name stuck. So join me as we discuss the number of Henrys and Matildas that took part in the First English Civil War.
All righty.
Wow.
You mean the one time they weren't fighting the French?
Funnily enough, this is back at the time when England was a vassal state of France, and yes, they did fight the French.
What do you know? Who'd have thunk it? That's why they felt so out of place during World War II and World War I. What, we're on their side? What the hell?
This is not right.
This is not right.
So, to set the scene for everyone, I've got a load of notes here. I'm going to read a fair amount from the notes if you don't mind. But I've got my notes here. Henry I took power as the King of England in mysterious circumstances. Shall we say, it may not have been entirely legitimate, because his elder brother, William, who was the son of William, because English monarchs love to recycle names. So William, and then Henry.
You mean like Elizabeth and then Elizabeth?
Yes.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, they get certain names. It's like you can have one of these three, and if you don't choose quick enough, you will be called Henry. That's pretty much how it works.
Back then, yeah.
So William II took over after William I, the Conqueror, died, and he went out hunting and mysteriously got shot while hunting. Suddenly, his brother is king.
Yes, imagine that.
It's a wonderful situation. You've got to love family rivalries.
Oh yes,
but Henry I, he was a decent enough ruler. It seemed quite well liked, but he had a bit of a notorious temper, and if anyone rebelled, he would execute everyone.
Yeah.
Really good, really good at that. But it was sometimes necessary, because England at the time, the lands of England were England, just from the base of Scotland right the way down to the English Channel, and then across the Channel and into Normandy. So you didn't want to have to rush back and forward all the time to try and keep your lands right. You had to deal with them quite severely. So you can probably understand why he did that. But he had, through a load of political alliances, married off his daughter Matilda to the Holy Roman Emperor, which meant that she spent a lot of her time in one of the largest and most, weirdest courts of all time, where she learned how to rule. And Henry knew this, and he wanted her to be his successor as the first Queen of England.
Okay.
But Norman law, which is what controlled England at the time, the Norman law, said that a woman was the subject of her husband when she got married.
Yes.
So under Norman law, if she married again after her husband, the Holy Roman Emperor, died, then her husband would take over the English throne.
Yes.
By Norman law. So all the barons went, but that means we don't know who's going to be king, because someone will get the throne and it'll be a foreign power, and we don't want that.
Yes.
So they said to Henry, I'm sorry, sire, but can you rethink this? Can you actually choose your son instead? So he decided, no, I want Matilda and I want you all to swear an oath. And they said again, no, choose your son, William. Because you have to have continuity with these things. It would have another William. So eventually he relented. And William decided that the best thing to do was to go and learn about how to rule the kingdom and go off to Normandy. And a few people in the comments have already mentioned what happened. There's this thing called the White Ship disaster. William and a bunch of high-grade military guys were on the White Ship, as it was called, sailing across the Channel, and it sank because the people in charge were drunk. And that's
lovely.
Yeah, that's the prevailing theory, that they managed to sink the ship due to being
why did
drunk.
they go and get the Scots to damn well sail the ship? Bloody hell.
So there it goes. And now William's dead. So Henry hasn't got an heir according to English law. So he decides, right, well, that means I'm going to have my own way, whether you like it or not, and got all the barons to swear an oath of fealty and loyalty to recognize Matilda as his heir. And then he died. But Matilda was off in Normandy, married to Geoffrey of Anjou, and learning all about how Normandy worked and how all the Norman laws worked. So, unfortunately, she'd been doing all the marital things that were required of a lady at the time of producing an heir. So she was heavily pregnant with her third child when Henry I died, which meant she couldn't travel to England, and you had to travel to England and speak to the Archbishop and get crowned in London.
Yes.
But she couldn't travel. So now we had no king.
Yes, because back in the day, they used to make when there was a contest, when the crown was contested, there'd be a mad dash for London.
Yeah,
just like back in the old Roman days, there'd be a mad dash for Rome.
Yes, it's like the wacky races.
Yes.
So she can't travel. The local barons all know this, and they're all starting to raise their armies, preparing for trouble, because they know that if there's no king on the throne, there can't be an English army, which means bandits are going to raid. So they're all building up their armies. And then all of a sudden, this other guy, Stephen, he comes into the scene. Now, he's a cousin to Matilda and a grandson of William I. So he has a kind of claim to the throne.
Yeah.
And he decides, right, someone's got to sort this out. I'll do it. He travels to England from Normandy as well, because they're all in Norman. No one's actually, the English kings at this point in their history do not live in England.
No.
They're all French.
Yes.
It's really annoying. So he travels to England, lands at Dover with an army. Like, I'm going to sort this stuff out. And the army meets him at Dover and declares him king. So now we have King Stephen, and he's breaking the chain. He doesn't fit the normal rule. So he decides, well, we're going to have to sort this out. And he heads to London and gets himself crowned. But before he can do that, he has to go and meet the clergy, because everyone, all the barons and all the clergy and everyone have sworn an oath to Matilda.
Yeah.
And they've sworn an oath before God. If you break that oath in the 12th century, well, that means you're damned to hell for all eternity.
Yeah, you might as
So
well just
that-
get your head chopped off now and be done with it.
Yeah, that was a big thing back there.
Yes.
So he went and met up with the. He went to. Oh, where did he go? He went. Let me just check my. I believe it's Winchester, but I want to make sure.
Winchester sounds about right.
Yes, he went to Winchester, which just happens to have two major advantages. It's the seat of the Treasury rather than
Yes.
London. They kept all the money in Winchester. And Stephen's brother just happens to be the Bishop of Winchester.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Coincidence. Yes.
So he has a chat with his brother who says, no, don't worry, I can square this. And they then together go and talk to the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the church in England. And they say, well, we've found out that Henry actually recanted that requirement for an oath on his deathbed. So it's all square. That everyone can pledge fealty to me because I'm here and I can sort this mess out. So it's okay. You'll be fine. And the Archbishop of Canterbury goes, well, you know what? Since I can't prove either way whether he did this or not, we're going to take you on your word.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
And
sure.
you've got a bishop. Exactly. It's like, oh, sure. But you've got a bishop here who just happens to be your brother. I'm going to ignore that for the moment. He's saying that you're square, so we'll go with it.
Yeah,
They
sounds
found
about right.
Stephen.
Sounds about right.
It's just
no shenanigans
ridiculous.
there.
I know it's all totally 100% legit. There is no question about it.
Yeah. Thank God we're not covering Henry VIII, or we'd be in a long day.
Oh my goodness, Henry VIII! What a weird. You know, he started out being pretty good. He was a decent king, really
Although
well liked.
I will say this: Henry VIII wins the masculine. I've got all the balls in the world, because he looked at his wife one morning and went, "Dear, I love you so much. I'll let you choose guillotine or axe."
Oh my goodness!
Only I mean that takes some stones. I'm just saying.
Henry VIII has to go off topic. Henry VIII actually has an interesting thing. It's the same as Caligula. Both of them were regarded as really decent stand-up guys, well liked by everyone, and did okay in their rule until they got a massive brain fever and went completely batshit crazy.
Yes. Henry VIII. He was special.
Oh, very, very special. Not different, just special.
And you know, the Protestants and the Catholics have him to thank for all the lovely animosity over the years. But anyway,
Let's face it, they would have found something else.
oh, they would have
fight over.
fought anyway. But you know, it's always nice to be able to go, it's his fault.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You've always got to have someone to blame. So
absolutely.
now we've got Stephen on the throne, and just to make things really confusing, he's got a wife, and she's called Matilda, and she's going to be very important.
Oh, lovely.
Yes. So at this point in the thing, I've got to summarize. In the red corner, we have Stephen, son of Stephen Henry, with a brother called Henry.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
And he is the husband to Matilda. And in the blue corner, we have Matilda, daughter of Henry,
Yes.
wife of Geoffrey, and their son, Henry. Everyone's
confusion
called
there at
bloody
all.
Henry.
Yeah, pretty much at that point in time. Pretty much.
So yeah, according to my notes, Stephen's first few years, they went down pretty well. He's consolidating his power. He's popular with the people. He's popular with all the barons, which is really important because, let's
Yes.
face it, the people don't matter. The barons with the castles, they're the ones you keep on side.
Yes.
The barons all swear an oath of fealty to Stephen as king, but not all
Yeah.
of them were actually happy about it. A few of them, like Robert of Gloucester, who will become very important. He is the illegitimate son of Henry I, and he basically swore that oath through gritted teeth because his sister is Matilda, who's over in Normandy.
Yes.
So he goes along with it. And at that point, Matilda hears the news that her cousin has basically stolen her job. She goes absolutely ballistic. Now,
Mhm.
she's still heavily pregnant. She can't travel yet. But she can get in contact with her uncle, who happens to be King David of Scotland.
Yes.
So David decides, well, I can invade England and I've got an excuse because the Scots love to invade England.
Oh,
We all
yes.
like to fight. And he decides, I can put myself up as an avenger of her honor because she has been dishonored by Stephen. So I'm going to invade.
Yes.
Here comes the Scots. They're coming down and they're going to attack. And this is basically why Game of Thrones looks like Game of Thrones, because it's all based on the anarchy.
Yeah.
True story. That's where it comes from, which is why everyone's nuts and everyone is related.
Yes.
So David comes down and he meets the English army led by Stephen up at Durham. And Durham is particularly close to my heart because that's where I'm from. And I know where the battle was held. Like a lot of the battles that were held in Durham, they happen to be on a large plain on top of a really, really steep hill called Red Hills. And it's called Red Hills because it's incredibly steep. You can stall cars going up this thing, even though there's a road on it. And it's so steep that if you murder a lot of people on top, which is tends to what happens in a battle, the blood flows as if it's a river.
Yeah.
So that's why it's called Red Hills. So they're having this battle there. And Stephen manages to actually stop David's forces. But David's not killed. He goes home and says, I'll be back, but we're going to have a treaty for the moment.
Yes.
But they've got a treaty. David's not going to go any further forward. So that's good news for Stephen because the Welsh have decided to attack as well. So now he's got to leave all of his equipment and rush his army down to Exeter, where the Welsh have managed to take Exeter Castle. So now Stephen's outside Exeter Castle and he's going to settle in for a siege. But it's going to be a long siege. That's what he's planning because he has no siege weapons. They're all still up in the north and they can't get them down in time. The Welsh know that there's going to be a siege. They've brought in as much supply as they can, but it's not going to last. They've got about 3 months. They've got enough water to last a month or two, and then they've got enough wine to keep them going from there. And I am not kidding. They were drinking with wine. They were cooking with wine. They were washing with wine. And then the wine ran out. Someone says, who's leading the Welsh? Is it a Henry? It's not. It's a guy called Baldwin.
Yes.
But yeah, after 3 months, the Welsh have no more water and no more wine. So they're now facing the real prospect of dying due to dehydration. So they surrender and they ask for mercy. Now, King Henry I would have not accepted that. He would have slaughtered them all. But Stephen's a different guy, and he's really trying to get everyone on his side. So he says yes. He accepts their surrender, and he grants them mercy. He doesn't kill them all. Baldwin, the guy in charge of this, can't believe his luck, and he rushes straight off to Normandy to join up with Matilda.
Yes.
Because this guy's just been nice to me. I'm going to fight against him. That's how this
absolutely
makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No good deed goes unpunished. Damn it.
And
Exactly.
that essentially happens. So now Matilda's not pregnant anymore. She's had a kid, and her husband Geoffrey is deciding, well, at this point, Stephen's off fighting a load of rebellions. I'm going to invade Normandy. So now the Angevins are on the march and they're going up into Normandy, but they're not taking it. Geoffrey's got a different tactic. He's going to harry them instead. He's going in, taking a load of goods, setting fire to everything that he can, raiding her villages and sowing chaos wherever he can. He's making sure that Stephen has to come to Normandy. But Stephen can't exactly come to Normandy because Matilda's now doing her diplomacy and getting some of the barons of England on her side. So now he's got a Baron rebellion in the south of England.
Oh, lovely.
And people are starting to question whether he is actually the legitimate ruler, because right now the entire kingdom's in chaos.
Yeah.
And it's starting to look an awful lot like this is what happens if you break your oaths.
Yeah.
So is this the act of God coming down and saying, you got everyone to break their oaths? This is the discord I'm going to sow upon your kingdom.
Yeah.
So Stephen's having a hell of a time now. Starting to question whether he's the legitimate ruler, and he's got to do something quick and decisive. So he leaves the barons to it. Says, you look after your own places. I'm going to Normandy to put this mess down. He goes over to Normandy. Tries to re-legitimize his claim by talking to his client. He's like a client vassal to the King of France. So he goes and meets Louis. And there's going to be a few Louis.
Oh,
So
absolutely. It's France. There's always a
yes.
Louis.
If it's not a Louis in France, there's something wrong. It's probably a Napoleon instead.
Yeah. Which, he just gets blown apart all the time.
So Stephen manages to broker a truce. He gets the King of France on side. The French king accepts him as the King of England, and most importantly, the French king states that that Stephen's son Eustace is heir to the English throne. This annoys Matilda, as you can
Just
imagine.
a tad.
Because now Stephen's not just stealing her job; he's setting up his own dynasty.
Yes.
But Stephen stays back on in Normandy for a while. He's trying to beat back the Angevin troops, but he can't. There's too many of them, and they're too good, and Geoffrey actually knows what he's doing. So he decides that he's going to pay the Angevins to go home and stop invading for a while. He gets a bit of a truce. That's nice. But what's not nice is that Geoffrey manages to keep this going for so long that the treaty between England and Scotland runs out. So now David's back.
Well,
David's up in Scotland raising his army, and while Stephen's still in Normandy, he marches south and he starts taking the north of England. So Stephen now has to rush back home and fight a campaign in February in the north of England in the cold. Now, for those of you who haven't noticed what England's like, we tend to be very, very cold in the north of England. Scotland.
I wonder if it's anything like here.
Yes, you're on about the same line of latitude. If you look around in Scotland for the coastline, it's a bit of the North Sea here, and then round the corner is the Arctic Ocean. That's how high up we are. It gets cold. You do not want to fight a battle in the North winter. But that's what Stephen has to do if he wants to stop David. However, he's managed to think of something even better than that. He doesn't fight David. He marches his army straight past the Scottish and goes and invades Scotland. So now David's on the back foot and he's got to go home. So David heads back and... hang on. No, he doesn't. What does he do? Yes, David does head back. He heads home and meets him. But David's quite a diplomat too, and he's been sending out messengers. And now the barons in the Midlands of England, they're rebelling as well, and they're going to York. If you lose York, you've lost your main garrison between England and Scotland on the main trade route. Stephen has to go to York. There's no question about it. He's got to go and take back York. So Stephen does something very special. He splits his army in two, sends half of them to York with him, and sends half of them over to the other side of the Pennine Mountains to deal with Clitheroe, because there's a rebellion there as well.
Well, of course there is.
Yes, and it's the first time we've mentioned that part, but yes, we've got another...
More the merrier, right?
Absolutely. So Stephen goes with Clitheroe and leaves one of his trusted generals dealing with York. And this guy is good. He's really, really good. Archie Collins says, I can see why it's called the period when Christ and his saints... Yeah, it's absolute anarchy. It's chaos.
Yes.
So, who have we got now? David has come back down from Scotland because Stephen is over at Clitheroe. He senses he can get somewhere. So the Scots are back and they're marching to York as well. And that means that Stephen's forces there are overwhelmed. But here's the thing. The Earl of York is a really good strategist. He only has 10,000 men. He is outnumbered like 2 to 1. So he stands them on top of the biggest hill he can find and waits for the army of the enemy to come to him. This great northern army has with it something that's never been seen before in England. It's something that this guy picked up from an idea when he was campaigning in Italy. He has a standard with him. It's a giant cross attached to the mast of a ship on a cart. And basically, he is advertising that God is on his side. Look, he's got the giant cross. So this is called the Battle of the Standard. He keeps his standard on the top of that hill, and his army doesn't move. They protect it, and by staying with it, apparently they've got God on their side.
Yeah.
It works. It keeps his troops' morale up. So they fight. David orders his son to take the cavalry in to try and rally them down the hill and get them off this strategic advantage. But Henry, because of course David's son's called Henry, every book is called Henry.
Yeah.
He can't do it. He can't get the English off that hill. So David's got to send his troops in. And they get absolutely slaughtered.
Yes.
We actually have a song that doesn't have a particular... no one can actually agree where the song comes from, but it fits this particular battle. It's the Grand Old Duke of York had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill, and he marched them down again.
Yeah.
The English forces hardly lost a single person.
Yeah.
Scotland was routed, and they've got to go because the Duke of York, the Earl of York, has managed to decimate their army. So they scatter. Henry's heading back with David. They're in a mess. They've got to retreat. So after this, Stephen decides it's time to do a bit of diplomacy of my own. So he sends his wife, Matilda, to go and talk to David. And she's actually a damn good diplomat. It turns out that the Queen Matilda, to differentiate her from Empress Matilda, is a first-class diplomat. She goes and meets David at Durham, because that's as far back as the Scottish army have got by that point. And she hammers out a deal. Scotland will take control of northern England. The parts that David has managed to take, they're now under David's control, but they're still subject to English laws, and David will rule that part of northern England as a vassal to Stephen. So both sides get to claim a win, and Stephen gets the kind of victory that he needs to try and re-legitimize his rule.
Yeah.
So it's looking pretty good. But it's a bit of a shame that when this news happens, Robert of Gloucester, who swore his oath through gritted teeth, has decided that he's going to declare for Matilda. So now he's got another rebellion.
Well, of course.
And this one's not going anywhere because Robert does not like Stephen.
No.
It's ridiculous.
Illegitimate kids never do like the legitimate ones. Just saying.
Well, that's the weird thing. Robert does. Robert likes Matilda. He would have backed William as well. He just doesn't like Stephen because Stephen's an opportunist with even less of a claim on the throne than Robert does.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if he could have had the job, I could have had the job.
Yeah,
so you're not having the job.
Yeah.
Archer Collins says, wow, hadn't realized the song was that old. Yeah, that appears to be from my own research where it comes from. No one can actually agree. And sometimes the lyrics get changed and it's all about Napoleon instead. It's a bit of an odd chameleon of a song.
Yeah.
So now Robert's backing Matilda, and Matilda and Geoffrey hear about this. So Geoffrey raises an army in Normandy and marches for the coast. Stephen has to go and put down a rebellion in Hereford because everyone's rebelling here. But then William of Shrewsbury decides, sod this. Stephen is losing control of this kingdom. I am going with Matilda.
Well, of course.
So he then Stephen then has to take all of his troops and go and deal with that. And he goes over and he besieges the castle where William is. He murders every single person that he can get hold of. But William manages to escape. And because Stephen is now killing people instead of seeking peace, more barons declare for Matilda, and William is off joining up. So then Stephen has to rush around England and fight pretty much everyone. He manages it. Stephen is actually a better tactician than I ever expected before I started doing this research. Turns out that he's getting a lot of experience in war. He's getting a lot of experience in diplomacy. He's managing to put down these rebellions. But he still has a big problem because now all the bishops are starting to think, perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps we should go with Matilda as well. And Stephen can't fight the church. If he fights the church, he's got a major issue on his hands. So the barons he can deal with.
Yeah,
the church
can't fight the church because then King Henry VIII would have nothing to do.
Not just that. If he fights the church, the Pope's going to get involved, and the Pope has a fair amount more sway over people than the king does.
Yes.
So that's causing a bit of a problem. So Stephen decides, right, I've got to nip this in the bud. I've got to talk to the church. He demands that they all come to Oxford, and they're going to have a meeting at Oxford. And remember, Stephen's brother is one of the bishops.
Yes.
So they all go to Oxford, and of course, Stephen's brother's pulling them along, so they all have to go. But a fight breaks out because there's infantry there to defend the bishops, and there's infantry with Stephen as well. Someone starts something, and they all end up having a fight. Stephen blames the bishops for this. Yeah. Yes. They're all wound up. Everyone's angry. Something happens. Stephen says the bishops instigated this to make him look bad, and he demands that they give over their castles in compensation. They refuse. So Stephen arrests all of the bishops.
Yes.
And he's going to kill them. But apparently there's a third Matilda. She's related to one of the bishops. She manages to talk him down. So this Matilda only shows up for one bit to confuse historians, manages to talk Stephen out of killing everyone, lets the bishops go, and then they all disappear after several of them back Stephen. And that's got to be the work of his brother. It has to be. There's no other way that after you've been arrested and almost killed, you're going to say, yes, this guy can be king. But his brother's working behind the scenes, so they do it. So Stephen's kind of feeling like he's a little bit more legitimate. And then Baldwin comes back again. He's the guy from the siege at Exeter. He launches an assault on the port at Wareham. Now, this is a strategically important port. It's not quite as big and powerful as Dover, which is the closest port to France.
Yes.
But it is important. It's strategic. And if Baldwin gets Wareham, Matilda can land her troops without anyone being able to stop her.
Yeah.
So now Stephen's got to rush down to the coast to fight Baldwin. Baldwin gets beaten back, but he doesn't get beaten back to the sea. He's smart enough that he manages to rally his troops and get them down to the southwest. So Stephen's managed to save the port, but Baldwin means that Matilda has an army inside England, and Stephen can't get rid of it. So is he safe? Not really, because Matilda's been doing her diplomacy again, and it turns out that Henry I's second wife, Adeliza, is still in England, and she's still alive. So she's down at in her castle, and she's on pretty good terms with the Empress Matilda, and decides to invite her over for a visit.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, but of course, Matilda is a former empress, and she's married to a duke, a count, I think he's a count at this point. So she's allowed to travel with an entourage, which includes a standing army. So now she's got a legitimate reason to travel to England with an army.
Yes.
And she does. She goes down to see her mother-in-law, well, stepmother, in fact. So Stephen decides, well, I'm not having this. You're not landing an army. So he goes and blockades Dover. which is a great idea because it's strategically the best place that she could land her army. But Matilda doesn't arrive. She's not at Dover. She's gone and taken her ships and landed at Arundel instead, which is where the Dowager Queen is. So now Matilda's got her army into England around Stephen, and he can't do anything about it. But just for the icing on the cake, the Dowager Queen has married a guy called William, who is the guy in charge of Arundel, and he declared for Stephen.
Oh,
So this is awkward.
yeah, just a tad.
Well, I'll just have a quick look at the comments. Yes, just look at the problems Henry II had with the church. Oh, we'll get to him in a moment. Don't worry. So, yes, Stephen gets news. Matilda's already here. She's at Arundel with her army. So he marches an army down to Arundel and decides that he's going to set a siege around the castle. But here's the thing. Stephen is a diplomat, a renowned diplomat. He knows all about the rules of chivalry, and so does Matilda. The rules of chivalry and Norman law says that women aren't to be targeted in battles. But Matilda is a woman.
Yeah.
So she decides, well, if you're going to have a siege, I'd like to leave, please. So can I just be escorted out of here with all these bishops? And Stephen is required to say yes.
Yes.
So she just leaves. Stephen is surrounding this castle, and Matilda just walks right out past him,
Yeah.
straight up the road to meet up with Robert.
Yes.
So now Matilda and Robert are both in England, and there's a large army because her army might still be back at the Arundel Castle, but Robert's isn't. So now she's got another army. It's just
That's when you need an archer in the woods. Just saying.
Yeah.
Nobody saw it. Don't know how it happened.
Yeah, there just happened to be a hunting party. You know, the guys that were around with William, are they still around?
Yeah. Exactly.
So Matilda is now out and establishing power in England. And at this point, she's got her capital set up. She's set up court in Gloucester. Her half-brother is down the road in Bristol, setting up his own base of power. And Matilda has managed to get the Welsh on her side, all of the English down to Oxford, then all of the southwest coast, down Devon and down in Cornwall. Everyone is declaring for Matilda. Meanwhile, King David, who's on Matilda's side, is blockading the north. And Geoffrey, who is Matilda's husband, is damaging Normandy. Stephen's got hardly anything left. He's got like the Midlands and the southeast coast. That's all he's got left. But that's still not going to be enough. Because Stephen decides that at this point, he needs to deal with the major threat. If Matilda has Oxfordshire, she has control of part of the river that goes directly to London. So Stephen attacks Wallingford Castle in Oxfordshire. And this has to be taken. He has to have this. Because if he... Well, where's my notes? Sorry. Yeah. If Wallington falls to Matilda and stays in her control, she's on the Thames. She can get a boat and sail an army straight into London. She could be crowned queen within a couple of days. So he's got to take it. He besieges Wallingford Castle, but he can't take it. So what he has to do instead is leave a load of his troops there to make sure that she can't get in. If he's besieging the castle, she can't use it. It means that he takes some of his troops out of the battle, but she can't bring her troops over to a strategic point. It's a pretty good strategy. And initially, it seems to work. Except there's one little bit. He decides that the rest of his army is going to Trowbridge in Wiltshire, because that way he can start getting into Matilda's land. If he goes to Trowbridge, he takes South Kearney Castle and Malmesbury Castle at the same time on his way, which means that he now is getting straight on the road to Bristol, which is past Trowbridge. Is it Trowbridge? Yes, it is Trowbridge. And he splits Matilda's lands in half, which means that she now has to fight on two fronts. If he can do it, that is exactly what he should do. It's a strategic master plan,
Yeah.
which would have worked really, really well for him if there wasn't one problem. Matilda has a guy called Miles of Gloucester, which proves that there were potentially other names. Not everyone had to be Henry.
Yeah.
And he's part of her army. He's now running a bit of a campaign. So what does Miles do? Well, he goes and attacks Wallingford, which is exactly where Stephen was. So he's now battling in Wallingford, and Stephen has to pull all of his forces back out and go back. He didn't leave enough people behind. So he has to go and take this. He sends everyone back. But biggest problem is Wallingford is declaring for Matilda, and the guy who runs it, Wallingford Castle, Brian Fitzcount, he knows that this is a strategic place. Everyone wants to control this place. So he has packed Wallingford Castle with supplies, and he's ready to wait out the entire war if necessary. He's just going to sit there, and you can't get in. Wallingford Castle is impregnable at this point. So he's willing to sit there and just hold up as many of Stephen's forces as he can without problem. That's the beauty of this place, which is great because he doesn't actually have to show whether he can do it or not. Other people are starting to rebel again. There's a bishop called Nigel who is still really, really angry with what Stephen did at Oxford when he tried to arrest all the bishops. And he switched sides. Not only has he switched sides, but he's got his own army. And he's gone and invaded East Anglia. He's decided that he's going to take over the Isle of Ely in East Anglia. The Isle of Ely is pretty strategically important. If you can take it, you can run the entire place. It's like a castle because the area around it is marshland and you can't get troops across. So if he's got it, you can't get him out. Also, he thinks. Stephen rocks up with a load of boats and he lashes all those boats together and makes a floating causeway and marches his troops right onto the island.
Yeah.
He manages to actually just go in and take the island back. But Nigel's not there. He's already left. And he's over with Robert bringing another bunch of people in.
Well, of course.
So, it's great. They take a load of East Anglia again for Matilda, but not all of it because, like I say, this island is strategic. It's like a castle. So Stephen's still got control of the island and the surrounding area. But Robert has managed to take a load of land, which means that Stephen is getting weaker and weaker as it goes. But funnily enough, it's Oprah passing out the armies. Yeah, you get an army, you get an army, everyone gets an army. That's how it is. That's England. It's weird.
Yeah.
But here's the first weirdest thing. Henry, the brother of Stephen, has switched sides, and he wants peace. So he's convening a peace conference. He gets Robert to come along, acting on behalf of Matilda, and he gets Matilda coming along to act for Stephen. The other Matilda, not the Empress Matilda, Stephen's Matilda. Henry has got the clergy on his side, and together they're going to sort this shit out, as they say. But they can't. Because Henry says that the clergy should dictate the terms of peace since neither side's going to agree. So the clergy will do it. They'll talk to God and they'll get a peace deal. Stephen says no. So now, no peace. So Henry decides he's going back north for Christmas. It's like, sod you all, I'm going home. He heads north and he gets ambushed on the way by a baron called Ranulph. Ranulph is not happy because he has lands in the north of England, which Stephen ceded to Scotland. So he's losing out. So he's really angry. He ambushes Henry. And Stephen gets really angry with this. Henry escapes the ambush, goes, tells Stephen what's happened. Stephen personally escorts Henry home, which really angers Ranulph because it's like, that's a double slap in the face now.
Yeah.
So Ranulph declares for Matilda,
Well, of course.
Stephen's
As you
losing
do.
people left, right, and centre. Not only is he deciding to declare for Matilda, he's decided to invade Lincoln, and he captures Lincoln Castle. I don't know why he'd want to do that. Maybe it's just to get Stephen's attention. It works. Stephen marches to Lincoln, and he's prepared to set siege, but he decides, actually, let's just discuss. Let's see if I can get him back on side. I'll have a talk. We'll apologise for the whole Scotland situation. We'll have a chat. Stephen says Ranulph can keep Lincoln Castle as like a compensation for the lands that he's ceded to Scotland. Ranulph agrees, settles in. He sends most of his army home. Stephen heads off to London, but Ranulph's going to stay and just settle into Lincoln Castle, get used to the place. Then Stephen turns his army around once Ranulph's army is home, and he marches right back and besieges Lincoln Castle. Funnily enough, because the castle is quite big, Ranulph sees Stephen coming, and he's not there. So Stephen is...
Whoa, shit! Gotta go!
Exactly.
Left.
So he's off now. He's run off to join up with Matilda, and he's really angry now. But Stephen is besieging Lincoln Castle. Robert joins up with Ranulph, and they both march on Lincoln, which means that Stephen has Ranulph's guard that he left behind is besieged in a castle. Stephen's army's here. Now Ranulph and Robert are behind him, and he's got enemies on both sides. This is a bit of a bind. Stephen has two choices. He can either flee in the cover of darkness before the battle starts, or he can stay and fight. Stephen decides to fight.
Of course.
He can't win. He's captured. So, Matilda now has Stephen, and he's in prison in her castle. Matilda contacts Henry, Stephen's brother, to discuss the situation, and they agree terms. So, Henry agrees that he will get the clergy to back Matilda's claim to the throne as legitimate and allow her to be crowned queen. In exchange, Henry will be able to control church business in England, whatever that means. He's not archbishop, so how is he controlling church business? Is he set up to be the next archbishop? It's not entirely clear, but they've come to this agreement. Stephen, on the other hand, is made to agree that the barons can be released from their oaths of fealty to him, so that Matilda can be crowned queen. So the war's over, isn't it? Matilda's won. She...
Is it? Is it really?
Yeah. Matilda is on her way to London. She takes her entourage, which includes a lot of armed people. The citizens of London think this is an invasion because they haven't heard what's going on with the peace treaty.
Yeah.
They think she's invading. They rise up in revolt, and Matilda and her entourage have to flee. So now she's not able to get into London. She can't be crowned queen. Meanwhile, Geoffrey, her husband, has invaded Normandy, and Stephen's brother Theobald can't fight him off because there's a new king on the French throne, and he wants to have a bit of action too. So Louis the Seventh is building up an army and looks like he's going to invade Theobald's domains. So Theobald doesn't come to Normandy to help out Stephen's forces, and Geoffrey just takes the place. And Theobald was actually right to do that because it turns out that the year after all of this happened, Louis VII invades.
Yeah, of course.
So now Geoffrey's conquered Normandy. Matilda's got Stephen in prison. Most of Stephen's army and allies have switched sides, and at the same time, the economy has collapsed. Now, local barons are basically having to mint their own money if they want to keep going. So this is the point where Victorian historians are actually saying, yeah, it's anarchy. The government's gone. There is no government. The king's in chains. There is no crowned queen. There's no treasury anymore because it's pretty much gone. And barons are minting their own cash. England doesn't exist at this point. So that's a bit of an interesting situation. Meanwhile, Stephen's wife, the other Matilda, she's up. She's up at his brother Henry's house, and she's talking to him to try and get him back on side. Matilda, the other Matilda, is setting up her court at Winchester Castle, and Matilda has taken Henry's forces because as a bishop, Henry had an army. She's now marched and she's besieging Winchester Castle. So it's now Matilda against Matilda.
Yes.
During the siege, turns out that this other Matilda is a really good tactician, and she manages to capture Robert. But Matilda, the Empress Matilda, she escapes. So Matilda's got Stephen, and Matilda's got Robert.
Yes.
They decide that it's time to negotiate a peace deal, but it doesn't work because Matilda, with Stephen's Matilda, she wants Robert to declare for Stephen and legitimize his claim. Robert refuses. And Empress Matilda wants some consideration of her own. If that's going to happen, she wants something. Queen Matilda says no to all of it. So now there can't be a peace deal. All they can do is exchange captives. So Robert's back on the battlefield and Stephen's back on the battlefield and the war's back on.
Well, of course.
Meanwhile, Stephen's brother Henry has switched sides again, and he's talking to all the clergy, saying, well, Stephen's back. He could be king again, right? And they all declare that Stephen is the legitimate king. But at this point, Stephen gets ill, really, really ill. And there are rumors circulating that he's actually died. So that's a bit of an issue. And the barons are starting to say, well, why are all the clergy saying this dead king is the legitimate king? There's got to be something wrong here. So perhaps we go for Matilda and sort this mess out. Then Stephen gets miraculously better, and he manages to ride north. He takes his army, and he goes and sees Ranulph. Ranulph switched sides again. And now he's favouring Stephen, because Ranulph is a revolving door of legitimacy here.
Yes.
So
whoever's winning, I'm on their side.
pretty much. He's a good time guy.
Yeah.
So with Ranulph on his side, Stephen now attacks a load of castles that are declaring for Matilda, and he eventually pushes her back to Oxford. Stephen manages to get into the city, and now he's besieging the castle. They're in for a long siege. But winter comes, and it comes really, really badly. The entire river in Oxford freezes over. Matilda sees her chance, and she rushes out across the ice, barely escaping, and gets to Wallingford. Then she heads back down south to Devizes Castle in Arundel and holds up there. Meanwhile, Stephen's still having to camp because it's winter and you can't move your army in the winter without a lot of logistics, so he's settled in. When the next battle season comes in the spring, Robert's back on the battlefield and he meets Stephen at the Battle of Wilton. Stephen has a big problem now because he's not as good a tactician as Robert is. He's almost captured again. But it turns out Stephen's got a great, really loyal guy on his side, surprisingly called William. And he brings a last-ditch rearguard action to let Stephen escape, getting himself captured in the process, but making sure the king gets out.
Yeah.
Stephen's really happy about this. But he's not happy that his main guy, his wingman, is now captured and on the other side. So he exchanges a castle at which one is it? Sherborne Castle. He exchanges that for Robert to get William out of jail. So William's back on the battlefield with Stephen. Robert's got an extra castle. This is almost unprecedented. Stephen doesn't exchange things for people. He normally lets them just sit in jail and raises a bit more of an army. But all of a sudden, here comes a new challenger. Please welcome Matilda's son, Henry, to the battlefield. He's coming in.
Henry.
So we got another Henry on. It's great, isn't it? They obviously didn't pick a name quick enough, and he got Henry by default. He's heading to England. He's met up with Ranulph, and he's got Ranulph to defect again.
Well, of course.
So now,
point enough swords at the guy. He's going to switch sides.
So now they're in contact with Robert, and they're able to split Stephen's forces. They go to Henry and Ranulph go to Lancaster, while Robert goes and harries Stephen's forces everywhere he can find them. So Stephen's now split. Meanwhile, Geoffrey is depleting Stephen's forces and money even further in Normandy, and Geoffrey now basically owns Normandy. So the Angevins have taken over the English holdings in France. So it's looking a bit like the writings on the wall for Stephen. He's fighting on every single side, and he's not getting anywhere. But Henry is headed back to Normandy because he thinks there's all we need is one final push. If we can take the southeast, we can win. So he's gone and raised an army of mercenaries in France, and now he's coming for an expedition into the southeast. If he takes the southeast, it's over. He gets free rein to march on London. So you'd think that would be pretty good for him, except Henry doesn't have any money, and he can't pay his mercenaries.
Oh, this is a bad idea.
Yes, they get to the southeast coast, and unless they can take a load of stuff quickly, Henry can't pay them. Well, they find out about this as they get there, and they're going to start causing trouble. So Stephen comes down and pays them off. The other side is paying their enemies, mercenaries, to go home.
Yeah. Here you go. Here's your money. Enough off.
Now, when I first found out about this was the weirdest thing that I'd ever seen. But thinking about it, it actually makes an awful lot of sense. If those mercenaries are angry and they're not paid, they're not going home. They're staying, and they're going to attack the area, loot all the villages, probably loot the monasteries, and get their money that way. Which is no good for Stephen, because he's got to fight this war. He can't be fighting mercenaries. So he pays them off, gets them to leave, and makes his life a lot easier. But of course, that depletes a lot of Stephen's resources. So actually, Henry's winning either way. Henry leaves. He's just gone. So see you guys, I'm off.
Out of there.
Tea time, gotta go.
Yeah. But the other problem is, with his forces depleted and his money depleted and his health depleted, because he was ill, almost died, Stephen is starting to think, I can't last much longer. If this keeps going on, I'm going to lose everything and I'm going to die. Did they loot the walnuts? Archie Collins says Stephen's mistakes, obviously not changing his name to Henry.
Yes.
It's true. But Stephen knows that his time is almost up. He has to sort something out. He needs a successor. So he starts talking to the church and saying, I need you to recognize as my heir, my son, Eustace. And the clergy are like, yeah, that seems legit. And then Stephen says, in order to make sure that we don't have this problem again, I need you to crown Eustace while I'm still alive. But that's illegal.
Yeah.
Under Norman law, you have one king at a time. You can't have a king and a co-king under Norman law. You could under Anglo-Saxon law, which was the law before the Normans invaded. That would have been fine. But this is Norman law. And the church knows if they crown illegitimately an illegal king, it's going to cause another civil war once Stephen's gone, because that's not a legal king. He can't have a legitimate claim to the throne. So they say no. Stephen tries again. And he goes and talks to his brother, Theobald, the one that was dealing with the French. And he says no. So Stephen arrests Theobald. He arrests his own brother. But Theobald manages to escape capture because Stephen is as good at keeping people in prison as Arkham Asylum is at keeping the Joker locked up.
Yeah.
So Theobald's off. And Theobald is now getting the church angry with Stephen. And they absolutely refuse to recognize Eustace. Meanwhile, Henry's back. He's going to Malmesbury Castle with a small army, and he's meeting up with Ranulph. So Stephen tries to fight them there, but he's unsuccessful. And they hammer out a temporary truce because it's winter. They all go home. And this is the first time that they're actually starting to get truces on the regular for winters. Because everyone, including all the barons, whose lands are getting pillaged and raided and fought across, and we're ending up with the potential that there's not going to be enough food soon because they're destroying all the fields fighting, they're starting to get a bit angry. It's like, can we just sort this out? So they all start to meet up with Henry, and it seems clear that They want peace. So they get the church to come and meet Henry as well. And the church says something to Henry that's not recorded anywhere, but which we have a good indication that they're saying, you can't win. Stephen is going to be king. He's been crowned king, but maybe you can be next. Which is a bit interesting because they don't want Eustace, but they might accept Henry. So perhaps we've got a road out of this. Summer comes. Stephen is still besieging Wallingford Castle from ages ago, and he's going to bring his army there. He wants a battle, a decisive battle, to get Henry out of England and sort this out. So they meet. They go down there, and Henry comes with an army as well. They're going to besiege Stephen's siege of Wallingford Castle, and it's going to be that situation where they captured Stephen all over again. But then Stephen marches out, leaves the siege, just completely lifts it, and goes and camps out by the river near Wallingford. He's going to fight across the water, which is dangerous, but it's a last-ditch thing. One of them's going to win here. And then the church turns up, and they say, come on, guys, it's over. The church is going to step in and sort this shit out. They're both armies are there. Well. They're ready to fight. The barons don't want to, but they know something has to give. And now the church is here. And they meet with Henry and Stephen. They get them to sit in a room and talk. For the first time, the major guys on both sides are in a room together on equal terms. And they hammer out a treaty. Stephen stays as king. Henry gets adopted as Stephen's heir. And the church will back all of this, and so will the barons. But when Stephen's son Eustace hears about this, he is not happy.
No,
so he heads.
Of course not.
He leaves. So he leaves in a rage and heads to Cambridge. He's got a plan. He's going to raise an army of his own, and now there's going to be three sides to this.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, while he's there in Cambridge, he falls really ill. And
yes,
a month
of course
later,
he does.
he's dead.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. So the third faction is just gone.
Yeah.
So now Stephen doesn't have an heir.
Don't.
Oh, by the way, if you're wondering what happened to the Matildas, they're at home. They've both gone home. The men are still fighting this. The women have all gone home.
Yeah, sod this.
So all that comes down to is now it's Stephen and Henry, and they've already got an agreement in principle, so they get it signed up. The treaty is written. The war is over. Stephen stays king. Henry is going to be his successor, which means the entire thing was completely for no bloody reason, because if they had all just followed what Henry I wanted, then Matilda would have lasted for a while, and then Henry would have been the successor anyway.
Well, of course.
And then the entire mess just could have been over with.
Yeah, but you can't do that. Where's the excitement in that? Where's the fun in that? There's no fun in that.
We wouldn't be talking about it today if it didn't all happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. So it's a complete mess.
So what we've learned today is if you defeat somebody on the battlefield, take their damn head and get it over with. Secondly, prisons are useless. Just take their head anyway. Oh, wait.
So we got in the comments.
Wait. Sorry. Future kings of England would learn that.
Yeah.
Henry VIII being one of them.
Henry VII as well. Let's go to Bosworth Field and decapitate Richard because I want kingship, damn it.
Or let's do the Rose War for fun. Yeah. That's it.
The War of the Roses. Henry versus Richard, and Richard lost.
Yes. Yeah. Richard had a bad day. Kind of lost his head.
Just a bit.
Yeah, kind of lost.
Poor guy.
We've got a question in the comments, though. Archer Collins says, did the law change? Because I thought Henry's oldest was crowned co-king before he died. He wasn't crowned. There was an agreement that he would be king, and everyone was made to swear fealty, but he wasn't crowned, from what I recall. So
Yeah,
they kind of
probably.
got around it that way. by
They
saying,
went around it, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and the royal family, for the most part, is full of bending the rules just a tad.
Yeah.
Until it breaks, as the Queen's as Queen Elizabeth's father's brother found out. Yeah.
Oh, don't get me started on that guy.
He might be, he was a good guy. He just happened to be a traitor king. No big deal.
I'm not entirely sure he was a good guy. He went
Well,
over to
I was
visit the
being
Nazis and
facetious.
and he got a guided tour of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And then he came home and he didn't tell us what was happening.
Well, not only that, but it's bad when, and I always refer to him as this, but I'll say it bluntly. When Hitler goes, "If I take London, you're the new king." That's a bad recommendation for thrownness. Okay, I'm just saying. It's the last person you want throwing up your banner. I'm just saying.
Yes.
But yeah,
Good point.
Just there's a reason you lived in exile for the rest of your life. But yes, which is interesting because without that point in history, Elizabeth wouldn't be on the throne.
Nope, it would be a completely different.
It'd be a completely different bloodline because it was her father who took the throne, who was never meant to be on the throne.
Yeah.
I mean,
although his dad did kind of suggest to Edward that he not take the throne and give it to his brother instead. But Edward went, "No, I want my turn."
Yeah, well, not only that, but I mean, his brother wasn't always known for. King George wasn't very good at talking.
No, he wasn't. Not at all. He was seen as quite weak, although it turned out that actually he was quite good at the job.
Yes, well, as the Queen Mother would say, she did say during World War II, because for the longest time they wanted the royal family to come to Canada during World War II, just in case. And Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mum, and people who call her Queen Elizabeth II annoys me, or Queen Elizabeth I. No, she's not the reigning monarch. She's a consort queen. Anyway, she basically, her response was, "My duty is with the king, and the king will never leave."
Yeah, and that probably helps an awful lot to keep morale up in Britain.
Yes, because
While
if the
we were
royal
getting
family
hammered.
leaves, you're sodded.
That's it. If the king is still there, then we're all staying. Damn it! No, regardless of how many bombs are dropped.
Yes, and I mean, Queen Elizabeth II grew up shooting guns at like statues of Germans. Like,
yeah, she's an absolute badass.
Oh, bloody hell! It's funny because we joke over here. I don't know if you guys make the same joke, but Queen Elizabeth carries around a purse. Queen Elizabeth II. That woman has never needed a shilling in her life. I'm just saying. She can walk in anywhere and go, "I'd like a cup of tea." "Yes, Your Majesty." Get her fucking tea now. Right?
Yeah.
And there's no bill.
Right.
But she still carries a purse.
Yeah.
So we always joke that she's carrying a gun. It's the only logical explanation for her to carry a purse. It's got a gun in it.
I did actually find out what was in it one time. And she carries, on a Sunday, she has a £5 note in it so that she can give to the church when she goes to the service.
Yeah.
At Christmas, it's a bit more, but for the majority, it's a £5. And she also carries a small suction cup with a hook on it. So when she's at meetings, she can suction the hook to the bottom of a table and hang her handbag on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's great.
You don't want it on the table. And then, of course, because I believe it was Mark Dane Fletcher that brought up American politics. The most funniest thing to ever happen on a newscast was when Bush Jr. and Queen Elizabeth II were standing together in Washington. And George Bush has the Queen standing right beside him. And he goes to make this big speech, and he gets a glare from her that I think if heads could roll still, his would be on a pike somewhere. Because what he meant to say was that Queen Elizabeth hadn't been in the United States since 1976 for the 200 bicentennial of the United States. What he said was Queen Elizabeth II hasn't been here since 1776.
1776. Yes.
Which got a look from Elizabeth II that if she could still cut heads off, his head would have been rolling all the way down the pike. But yes, that was the most funniest thing I've ever seen. Yes. Just, the last time she was here was in 1776.
By a time machine.
Yes. Motherfucker. I'm not that
We
old.
started out the stream with timey-wimey, so there you go.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, that was one of the that was one of the funniest thing I've ever seen in the world. It was just like, what did you just say, you dumb son of a bitch?
Oops.
And even Bush Jr. in an interview later, they asked him about it. And he says, well, I'll put it this way. She gave me a look that only a grandmother can give. Yeah. But on that note, I want to thank you so very much. It was very informative and very fun.
Thank you.
Zoe, you want to promote your channels on
Yes,
YouTube?
I was
I know
about
you're
to-
going to be starting a new podcast.
I will be. I'm starting a podcast called The Complete History of Britain. And we're
Nice.
going from the end of the last ice age up to the year 2000, covering all of the major things that happen. The anarchy will be in there, but it'll be quite a way in because we're starting at 12,000 BC.
Oh, lovely.
That's,
Oh, it's just a little
it's a bit
little
off.
back there. Yeah.
Just remember, to really point out when the Romans made the bad mistake of crossing the crossing that little English channel there and deciding we're going to march in the woods, single file, so that the British can just off us.
Yeah, the funniest thing is that when Caesar decided that he was going to invade Britain, the Romans weren't entirely sure Britain was there.
No.
There was actually quite a myth surrounding it because you can see England from France on the coast, but only sometimes. Most of the time, it's all mist. So
Yeah.
it looks like this is a land that appears and disappears as if it's magic. They
Yeah.
weren't sure they could set foot on it, but he went
Yes.
anyway.
Yes, and then there was the time that the Romans decided to invade Britain. And instead, they brought back seashells because the army refused to go. But there's that. But there's that little tidbit. But whatever. But yes, thank you so very much. And
I know you have another channel.
Yes, and
Oh, yes, I do. My main channel is Game Hammer Classic Gaming. You might notice the computer games behind me. I review old retro games on Game Hammer Classic Gaming, and I also have a vlog channel, which is ZJKR, and it's my vlog. That is probably where the podcast will go. I haven't decided which channel it's going on yet.
awesome, very awesome.
good.
And also, you can see her bringing class to Question of Trek as Conti does
Absolutely.
bring down the class. She brings up the class. Poor Conti, he's gonna get mad at me. Oh well, I don't care.
He left already. He left
Yeah.
already, so he
He's
probably
not here
didn't
to
hear that.
hear it.
Yeah.
We
What
won't
you
tell
don't
him.
know, don't hurt him. But as they, every good show has a mouthpiece, and then they have the brains. I have the brains on today. Anyway, so make sure you tune into Question of Trek. And with that, as my dear friend used to end these, thank you and good night.